So he says the invalidators of wudu, there are 8. 8 things which invalidate a person's wudu. He begins here, خارج من سبيل مطلقة. So this is what exits the track. So this is the urinary tract or the intestinal tract. Whatever exits it. He says this is something that will invalidate your wudu. Whether it's something apparent, very clear, or something which is considered pure itself that exits. Whether it's an abundant amount or whether it's very little. Whether it's something that is very rare that occurs, like a worm or a stone, passing a stone. Or something that is normal, like urine or feces. Even something that is pure, like a child born without any blood coming out. Or something which is najis, which is impure, like urine, those types of things. So everything that comes out of as-sabilain, these are the 2 tracts, the urinary tract and the intestinal tract, when they come out, they break the wudu. He says it also is broken or invalidated. He says, فَيَنْقِضُ الْخَارِجُ مِنَ السَّبِيلَيْنِ وَلَوْ رِيحًا, even if it's gas or air passed, مِنْ قُبَلِ أُنْثَى أَوْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ, whether it is from the front private of a woman or that of a man. That's the first type. The second type, he says, خُرُوجُ بَوْلٍ أَوْ خُرُوجُ غَائِطٍ مِنْ بَاقِ الْبَدَنِ. So here, we're talking about the same substances. He says, whether that is urine, which excretes from, he says urine or feces, which excretes from the remaining parts of the body. So if it comes out of anywhere else of the body, then this also invalidates the wudu. Whether it is a minute amount or an abundant amount. Whether it comes out of the body below the stomach, or whether it comes out above the stomach. So wherever it would excrete, if there was a wound which would allow excrement to come out or urine to come out, or there was some type of apparatus, medical apparatus that would be pulling out these substances, as long as it is coming out wherever in the body, it's considered that which will break the wudu. All the while, if the sabilan, the urinary tract and the intestinal tract, they are working in proper order, open, or they are blocked and closed, which would necessitate some type of intervention, it will break the wudu. He says also, what breaks the wudu here is, other than those 2 things which come out of the body, like vomit or blood, if it is in abundant amount, according to each individual. So a person, if they were to vomit, or if there was blood to come out of the body, or any other liquid that comes out of the body, then they would calculate on a personal level, is this a little or is this a lot for me? And then if it's an abundant amount, according to each individual, then this is something that will break the wudu. The third category is zawal al-aql, which is unconsciousness or the loss of a person's mental faculty, whether that's by way of unconsciousness or by way of coma or something of that nature, whether the person goes insane, whether it occurs by way of a sleep, which is a deep type of sleep, a heavy sleep which prevents a person from understanding things. He says here, تقع على القلب, something that occurs in the heart. We know the heart is what is محل إدراك, that which we can differentiate and distinguish things. تمنع المعرفة بالأشياء. You can't determine this or that. You don't know what's going on. He says إلا, except. The exception of the sleep here is one a light sleep of one standing or sitting, either standing up, independently standing up on their own, or sitting independently sitting on their own. He says here, and if the person in this condition was doubtful about if it was a lot of sleep, if it was a heavy sleep or a light sleep, then they don't pay any attention to doubt, but they base their feelings on what is certain. This has to be understood, coupled with the fact that light sleep, he says, وَيَنْقُضُ الْيَسِيرُ مِنْ رَاكِعٍ وَسَاجِدٍ وَمُضْطَجِعٍ وَمُسْتَنِدٍ وَمُتَّكِئٍ. Right? So if a person is like just lightly napping, very light, just kind of dozing in and out, if they're in ruku', if they're in sujood, if they're lying down, if they're leaning against something, if they're lounging against something, if they're lounging, then this is a light type of sleep which will break and invalidate the wudu. That means if somebody were standing in prayer and they were standing in a long prayer and they were very exhausted and tired and they were in their ruku' or they were in their sujood and they began to doze off and sleep a little bit, then they would need to exit the prayer to make wudu again. The fourth type he says here is the washing of the deceased. غسل ميت مسلما كان أو كافرا. To wash the deceased, whether they're Muslim or they're not Muslim, whether they're young, whether they're old, be they male or female. And this, of course, is min mufradat al-madhab. Unique rulings of this madhab of Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala. He says this also includes washing a portion of the deceased. Washing the entire body or washing a portion thereof. Even if the deceased is in a garment, or clothing, or something of that nature. There's a distinction to be made between the person that's actually washing the deceased, handling the body directly, versus the one that's assisting, which is only pouring water or handing instruments and those types of things. So the one assisting pouring water that doesn't come in direct contact with the body, the wudu is not broken. It's only the one that is in direct contact that's maneuvering the body and handling the direct washing. The next and fifth category here is eating camel meat, even if it were raw meat, or cooked. And this is ta'abbudan. This is a form of worship. He says, فَلَا يَعْقِلُ مَعْنَا. Right, this wudu that is made for eating camel meat is something that is pure worship. It's something that is done in surrender and yielding to the command of the Prophet ﷺ, and the meaning of it is not exactly known or comprehended. He says, فَلَا نَقْضَ بِبَقِيَّةِ أَجْزَائِ. There's no nullification of wudu if you were to consume the remaining portions of a camel. So if you were to eat the liver, if you were to eat the heart, if you were to eat the stomach, if you were to eat the fat, or any other part of the camel, like drinking its milk or drinking its stock, maraq lahmiha, which is if you take the meat and you put it in water and you begin to cook it, it turns into like a broth. So if you were to drink the broth, it doesn't break the wudu. Because, and this is what was mentioned by Imam al-Buhuti, one of the great imams of the madhab, in his book Sharh Muntah al-Iradat, that the authentic traditions that have been narrated regards to the meat of the camel and its ruling, he says, غَيْرُ مَعْقُولِ الْمَعْنَى. The meaning of it is not comprehended. And therefore, you have to restrict yourself to the words exactly as they are. They cannot be expanded to the entirety of the camel, but because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the meat, al-lahm, which is the muscular part of the camel as it's cooked and consumed, this is what it must be restricted to. Number 6 here, he says, to touch the private of a human being, سواء كان ذكر رجل أو قبل امرأة, whether it is the male private part or the female private part which is attached to the body, not one that has been severed. If it is severed, he says, لا منفصل لذهاب حرمتي, because when it's severed, its sanctity has been lost as it has been removed from the body itself. Also, the wudu is broken if you touch the anus, not the buttocks, but the anus, the actual opening of the human being. وَلَوْ كَانَ الْمَمْسُوسِ مَيْتًا, even if the one that is touched is deceased. So there's no distinction between touching yourself or touching someone else with your hand, because the hand is what is considered and not the actual thing that's being touched, whether it's yours or someone else's. He says, وَلَوْ زَائِدًا. He says, even if it's with an extra appendage, if you had an extra finger or an extra growth on the hand itself, but it does not invalidate the wudu if it's touched with something else like the fingernail. He says there's no difference between the palm of the hand, there's no difference between the back of the hand, nor is there any difference with the side of the hand, any of the side here. Because they are all portions of the hand, each of them resembling the other, in particular the side and the batin al-kaf, and then dhahruha. So the batin al-kaf is the palm, and then dhahr al-kaf is the outer side of the hand, and then harfuha is the ridge here along the side. So all of those things are a part of the ruling here. And this has to be done without a barrier. So if there's no article of clothing, there's no perhaps like a wipe, tissue, paper, something that would prevent you from direct contact. If it's direct contact, then you lose your wudu. If there's something preventing direct contact, like the things I mentioned, then it will not invalidate a person's wudu. He says it's not broken with touching the testicles, nor is it broken with touching the location of a severed organ. So if the organ was severed, the location where it once was, there's nothing there. If you touch the location, it's not touching the private. It's touching the place where it once was, and it does not break the wudu for that. The seventh category, getting close to the end here, is to come in contact with the opposite gender, to touch their skin directly with desire, with some type of sensuality, without any covering, without any barrier. He says here, even if the touching was zaid li zaidin, an extra growth, if you will, like an extra finger, or an extra toe, or an extra something growth on the arm or the body, that if you were to touch this extra growth with the other person's extra growth, which is outside of what's considered normal for the human being, even doing that is enough and sufficient to invalidate a person's wudu. He says, وَلَوْ كَانَ الْمَلْمُوسُ مَيْتًا أو عجوزا أو محرما أو صغيرة تشتهى وهي بنت سبع فأكثر. He says that also includes the one that's being touched if it's deceased, if they're a deceased person, and there's some type of feelings of desire for that, maybe a loved one like a spouse or something, or an elderly senior, or a mahram, someone that's it's illegal to approach anyway, or a young person, here specifically young girl, who is desired and she is 7 years or older. 7 years or older. He says it does not, and it is not broken for a young girl or young boy below the age of 7. Also, it is not broken, for example, a woman that touches another woman. He says, وَلَوْ لِشَهْوَةٍ فِيهِنَّ, even if they have some desires between them, it's not broken. Nor is it broken, he says, وَلَا لَمْسَ سِنٍّ, the tooth, وَظُفَرٍ وَشَعْرٍ, that if it's touched with a tooth or with the fingernail or the hair, this does not break the wudu. وَلَا اللَّمْسَ بِذَلِكَ, and if you were to touch someone else with your hair or your tooth or your nails, then that would not break your wudu either. And he also says here that the wudu is not broken of the one being touched. If their privates are being touched, their wudu is not broken. But the one doing the touching, the wudu is broken. He says, "Oh, amalmus badani, walau wajada shahwa," or the one that's being touched on another part of the body, physical contact of the skin, because they're not doing the touching, but they're being touched. Even if there was some desire or sensuality that was associated with that, it would not break their wudu, but would break the wudu of the one that was actually doing the touching themselves. The last and final category, number 8, is ar-ridda an al-Islam, a'adana Allah ta'ala minha. This is apostasy from the faith of Islam, and we seek Allah's protection, and we seek His preservation. He says, وَكُلُّ مَا أَوْجَبَ غُسْلًا. So if someone were to apostate he says, then this would invalidate their wudu. Maybe there's bigger things to worry about, but the fuqaha, when they dealt with the topics of this chapter, for example, nawaqid al-wudu, invalidators of wudu, they dealt with every possible scenario, or what they could imagine, or what is most frequent, or what happens. And so this is from nawaqid al-wudu, that a person were to apostate, because we know that wudu, a person should be Muslim in order to purify themselves. And so the moment that they remove the yoke of Islam from their neck, then all that they have done has been, in terms of purification at least, has been lost. Because everything that obliges a ghusl, a ritual bath, also obliges al-wudu. Right? It's obvious. The ritual bath is much greater, and the wudu is a lesser type of purification. So because you have to make a ghusl, it obliges you also to make wudu, to purify yourself. Such as any type of intimate contact with the sexual organs, or movement, even if internal, of seminal fluid. Even if it's internal, meaning it has not been expressed from the body. And that's something we'll discuss in the next chapter. It says, أوجب wudu, and also it's obligated wudu here. Everything that obligates ghusl obligates a wudu, except for death. فإنه يوجب الغسل لا الوضوء بل يسن. He says that death does not obligate wudu, but it only obligates a ghusl. The wudu for the deceased is considered sunnah. He concludes here by saying that wudu is not broken or invalidated by impermissible speech, someone that uses foul words or backbiting or whatever is considered haram, nor removal of hair or of fingernails or other things of that nature. He says, وَمَنْ شَكَّ فِي طَهَارَةٍ أَوْ حَدَثٍ وَلَوْ فِي غَيْرِ الصَّلَاةٍ بَنَى عَلَى يَقِينِ. Here he talks about one of the crucial important points here. Whoever doubts in their purification or in their hadath, meaning their impurity, even if it's outside of the prayer, then they should base their actions upon certainty. So what that means essentially here is that if a person begins to doubt their purification, بعد تيقن, he says here, a taraddud والشك خلاف اليقين في طهارة بعد تيقن وحدث. So the person has broken their wudu. I'm certain I used the restroom, for example, or I passed gas. I'm certain of it. And then you begin to think, but did I make wudu afterwards, or did I make wudu before? So you're doubting whether you made wudu. So what do? You based it on the certainty of you breaking your wudu. I know I did that. I'm uncertain if I purified myself. So then you go and purify yourself. The second one, he says, أو شك في حدث, that he becomes doubtful in regards to a hadith. The hadith is that which obligates a wudu. So, بعد طهارة. So you made a wudu, you know. So I know I've made wudu before dhuhr. I prayed dhuhr. And then I may have passed wind. I may have gone to the restroom, I'm not sure. But I do know that I made wudu. So in this case, you stick with certainty, and that is the fact that you made wudu, and you remove the doubts from your mind until they become strong enough that they overcome your certainty. The moment that they've overcome that, you're like, yep, as a matter of fact, I remember, even if it's in your prayer, you know for certain that, yes, I did break my wudu, then you have not performed the necessary purification to continue. And that's the conclusion for this chapter.